The Dangrek Mountains rise like a jagged scar along the Thai-Cambodian border. In the early light, they seem peaceful, a ribbon of green against the pale sky. But in June 1979, these cliffs became the stage for one of Southeast Asia's most harrowing tragedies. Tens of thousands of Cambodian men, women, and children, exhausted, starving, and traumatized by years of war, crossed into Thailand seeking refuge. They had survived the Khmer Rouge's killing fields, the famine, and the chaos of a country collapsing under the weight of its own suffering. They believed they had reached safety. Instead, they were herded back toward danger. Forced down treacherous slopes into minefields, they faced death in a place they thought would save them. This is the story of the Dangrek Massacre, a silent genocide that claimed over 43,000 lives. A story buried for decades, whispered only among survivors, and ignored by much of the world. Today, we will walk back into those mountains, retracing the steps of the desperate and listening to the voices that refuse to be silenced. By early 1979, Cambodia was a country in ruins. The Khmer Rouge's brutal rule had emptied cities, dismantled schools, and turned fertile farmland into mass graves. Nearly 2 million people had perished in less than 4 years, executed, starved, or worked to death. When Vietnamese forces invaded in January, toppling Pol Pot's regime, the nightmare did not end. Fighting raged in the countryside as Khmer Rouge remnants waged guerrilla war. Villages burned, rice paddies lay untended, families were scattered. For ordinary Cambodians, survival meant escape. Entire communities began walking through jungles, across rivers, over mountains, carrying only what they could hold. Mothers cradled infants swaddled in rags. Children clung to their parents' hands. The elderly leaned on sticks, each step a battle against exhaustion. Their destination was the Thai border, a thin line on a map that promised safety. But for many, it was like fleeing a burning house only to find the street outside lined with more flames.
Thailand, already hosting tens of thousands of refugees, feared being overwhelmed. In March 1979, the government closed its borders. Soldiers were deployed to patrol crossing points. Landmines were laid in the undergrowth. Yet the desperate kept coming. They gathered in makeshift camps in the no-man's land between the two countries, strips of dirt and scrub where aid agencies tried to deliver food and medicine. Conditions were dire. Water was scarce. Disease spread quickly. Thai officials began speaking of humane deterrence, a phrase that sounded compassionate but hid a harsher truth. The goal was not to shelter the refugees, but to discourage them from coming at all.
In June 1979, a senior Thai military commander issued an order that would seal the fate of tens of thousands. Soldiers moved into the camps at Aranya Pratet and other districts, rounding up Cambodian refugees. They told them they were being relocated to safer camps. Families were loaded onto buses and trucks. The refugees, weary and trusting, climbed aboard, clutching their children, their bundles of clothing, their few remaining possessions. But the convoys did not head toward safety. Instead, they drove north, deeper into remote terrain, toward the Dangrek Mountains, a place few of the refugees had ever seen, and none could have imagined would become their grave.
The Dangrek Escarpment is a wall of rock and forest its slopes steep and treacherous. On the Cambodian side lay minefields, deadly remnants of years of war. On the Thai side, sheer drops and narrow, twisting paths. When the buses stopped, soldiers ordered the refugees to disembark. They were told to walk down the escarpment into Cambodia. Many hesitated. They could see the danger ahead. But hesitation was met with rifle butts, shouts, and gunfire. Carrying children, the elderly, and the wounded, they began the descent. The ground was loose and unstable. Some slipped and fell, tumbling into the ravines below. Others stepped on hidden mines, explosions tearing through the humid air. Survivors remember the sound of screams echoing through the trees, the acrid smell of smoke and blood, and then silence. The descent from the Dangrek escarpment was not a single moment of terror. It was a drawn-out ordeal that stretched over days. Wave after wave of refugees were driven forward, their numbers swelling into the tens of thousands. The sun hung heavy in the sky, baking the rocky slopes until the air shimmered with heat. The path was no path at all, just loose stone, tangled roots, and sudden drops that could swallow a person whole. Those who stumbled were met with shouts and the crack of rifle fire. Some were struck with rifle butts, others shot outright. The message was clear: keep moving or die where you stand. Mothers clutched children to their chests, their arms trembling with fatigue. Fathers tried to shield their families from the soldiers' blows, urging them onward even as their own legs buckled. The elderly, already frail from hunger, collapsed in the dust, unable to rise again. The air was thick with the smell of sweat, dust, and fear. Somewhere ahead, the dull thud of an explosion would roll back up the slope, a mine claiming another life. The sound was followed by silence, then the low murmur of grief from those who had seen too much to cry out. It was less a journey than a narrowing funnel, squeezing the living into a corridor of death. By the time the last groups were forced over the edge, the slopes were littered with bodies, some still, some writhing in pain, all abandoned to the mountain.
For those who lived, the memories are carved into the mind like scars in stone. One woman remembers the weight of her younger sister's hand in hers as they picked their way down the slope. They moved slowly, carefully, whispering to each other to step where the ground looked safe. Then, a flash, a roar, and the hand was gone. She never saw her sister again. Another survivor tells of crawling beneath the twisted roots of a fallen tree, pressing himself into the dirt as soldiers passed above. He lay there for hours, listening to the cries of the wounded and the dying, the metallic scent of blood heavy in the air. Some speak of the strange stillness that followed each explosion, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Others recall the way the night brought no relief, only the cold and the knowledge that morning would bring more death. Survival was not a victory, it was a burden. The weight of faces and voices that would never fade, the guilt of having lived when so many did not.
News of the massacre did not vanish entirely. Aid workers and journalists who had been stationed near the border sent urgent cables, photographs, and testimonies to their governments and to the press. The images were stark. Bodies sprawled on rocky slopes, children wandering alone, the wounded left without help. The reports were clear. This was no accident of war, but a deliberate act. And yet the outrage was muted. The Cold War cast a long shadow over Southeast Asia. Thailand was a key ally in the struggle against Vietnam's occupation of Cambodia. To condemn its actions risked upsetting a fragile balance of power.
In the halls of diplomacy, the massacre became a footnote, an uncomfortable truth best left unspoken. No one was prosecuted. No official apology was made. The dead were left without justice, and the living without recognition.
For decades, the Dangrek massacre was absent from history books. In classrooms, it was never mentioned. In official records, it was barely a line. Survivors carried their grief in silence, fearing that speaking out would bring danger, or that no one would believe them. Many passed their stories only to their children, in whispers, late at night. It was only in recent years that researchers, journalists, and filmmakers began piecing together the full story. They sifted through scattered documents, faded photographs, and the memories of those who could still bear to speak. Each testimony was a fragment of a shattered mirror. Slowly, the fragments began to form a reflection, not perfect, but enough to see the truth staring back.
The Dangrek massacre is not just a Cambodian tragedy, it is a warning to the world. Borders can be lines of refuge or lines of death. The difference lies in the choices of those who guard them. When fear outweighs compassion, when politics outweigh humanity, the consequences are measured in lives lost. Remembering is not an act of dwelling on the past, it is an act of protecting the future. Forgetting invites repetition. The cliffs of Dangrek still stand, silent witnesses to what happened here. They remind us that the decisions of a few can shape the fate of thousands.
In the Dangrek Mountains, the wind still whispers through the trees. For those who listen closely, it carries the voices of the lost, voices that speak of hunger, of fear, of love, and of the final steps they took on this earth. The world may have looked away in 1979, but we cannot afford to do so again. To remember is to resist silence. To tell their story is to give them back in some small way the dignity that was stolen. And so we leave the mountains as we found them, quiet, solemn, and eternal, but carrying with us the truth they hold.